event today. My name is Tim Passios, Vice President of Product Marketing here at Interactive Intelligence, and I'll be your host for today's session titled 5 Trends Set to Revolutionize the Customer Experience in 2016. Now, this has become an annual tradition for Interactive Intelligence as we assemble some of the top analysts in the industry to help us bring you the trends you should be aware of as we move into the new year. And based on the registration for this event, there's some great interest in this topic, so we've had nearly 1,800 people registered for today's session. So our goal here is that you leave this webinar today well educated and well prepared for the trends you'll be facing in 2016. And remember, we're not talking about trends that are years in the making. Instead, we're going to be giving you practical advice on current trends that you can take action on now. And to do that, we've assembled some highly skilled industry experts for this event that includes our feature presenters, Art Schoeller with Forrester Research, and myself, as well as some expert panelists who will be helping us with our Q&A session, Sheila McGee-Smith with McGee-Smith Analytics, and Don Van Doren with Vanguard Communications. Now, before we begin, I'd like to ask you for your indulgence as I cover a quick slide on our sponsor for this event, Interactive Intelligence. Interactive Intelligence provides software and cloud services for customer engagement, unified communications, and collaboration, or what we call C3, that help businesses worldwide improve service, grow their business faster, and reduce costs. With over 6,000 deployments worldwide, Interactive Intelligence is a recognized leader that has been in business providing solutions and best practices for over 20 years. They've localized their products in over 20 different languages and are in nearly 100 different countries, giving them the ability to meet the demands of organizations of every size. Their solutions are deployed either as a cloud service or as an on-premises solution, your choice. Now, for today's event, we'd like to encourage you to be social and feel free to tweet about the things you hear. Simply use the hashtag INLive in your tweets. And if you have any questions, we want to hear them, so make sure you submit them in the Q&A pod found at the bottom of your screen. We're going to spend extra time at the end of our presentation to make sure that we've covered as many of them as we can. And for those that we don't get to today, we're going to be sure to follow up with answers over the next few days. As expected, this web event is being recorded, and a copy of the slides will be made available to you at the end of the presentation. I'll take a quick look at our agenda. First, we're going to cover 5 main trends. And these are trends, as I mentioned, that are taking place today that you will expect to occur sometime over the course of 2016. We'll cover the drive towards Omni-Channel, a dramatic shift in the customer experience. This one here is particularly interesting. We've been listening a lot about customer experience, but there's something that's changing the way contact centers should be thinking about the customer experience. The rise of the Agile contact center. 4 key technologies that you should be aware of and how they're going to impact you in 2016. And the end of legacy hardware. So those are our topics. Let's get ready to move into our presentation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and first introduce you to our co-presenter here, Art Schoeller. Art and I are going to take turns delivering some of the material on each of the trends. So let's go ahead, before we dive into this material, I'll introduce him to you. As a principal analyst at Forrester, Art Schoeller supports infrastructure and operations professionals who plan, build, and run unified communications and contact center workloads for enterprises. He has over 35 years of experience spanning the computer, communications, and software industries. So with that, Art, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's dive into Omni-Channel, the customer demand for support across all channels.
Tim, thanks very much. I very much want to say thank you to Interactive Intelligence for sponsoring today's event and the opportunity to share our research. So, let's kick it off with a little bit of a cartoon here. Taming the channel beast. In the industry today, we do hear this term and a lot of debate and discussion, and I put the question up here, omni-channel, multi-channel, cross-channel, or is it the discovery channel? I've participated in a number of workshops helping customers work through their channel strategies, and we really can get caught up in these terms. But in today's environment, let's not do that. Let's stop and pause for a moment and really focus on what is it from the customer point of view that's important. At Forrester Research, we annually survey consumers and what channels they use. This is kind of classic data for a number of folks to have in their research, and certainly we've got our own data set here. But I think that the ability to step back from all of this confusion around terminology and to really focus in on not only what a number of us as researchers have in terms of channel utilization, but one key point that we stress is, research your own customers and what channels do they prefer and where are they entering into your organization and requesting service, requesting support, looking to buy products. We had a real tipping point last year, although it's kind of battling a little bit back and forth, where the first time in last year's data we saw self-service either through frequently asked questions or a website, and this could certainly be on a smartphone as well, that people can control their own experience by doing it themselves. And this is an important thing to understand about this data, is that the trend towards doing it myself first continues to increase. Phone interaction used to be number one, but it got knocked a little bit off the top of the charts by, self-service coming in at 76%, phone coming in at 73%. But I often talk about it in the workshops that I conduct, that it's time to now really industrialize what we do across all channels. We know what to do, and we've been doing it for years with voice, to do quality monitoring, to look at our queuing and routing, to establish service levels. And as an example, instead of just throwing email into a regular email inbox and pulling them out in the morning and doling them out amongst a bunch of agents, that's not the right answer anymore. It's truly important to look at all channels and across the board, where customers are coming in and what's being done. So that this industrialization of channels, instead of just debating, are we going to add web chat this year, becomes important not only for the very large enterprises, for example, a Bank of America who may have 50, 60 agents totally doing web chat and industrializing solely web chat. More of our mid-sized contact centers and even our smaller ones need to respond to this self-serve first and this move to assisted channels. And, we're going to talk a little bit later, Tim, about, the idea of contact centers and where they're going. But, this idea of self-serving first is not peeling off enough interactions to where contact centers are shrinking. The data that we have shows that people are actually growing seats. One of the industry associations that I'm on the advisory board, one of the top questions that people are trying to address is hiring agents. Our numbers here show that 13% are going to increase seats by more than 10%, and that 51% of contact centers are going to increase by 5 to 10%. So this idea of agents who can handle multiple contacts, the idea that I'm getting more contacts and that the self-serve is not peeling off, it's like the rising tide rises all boats. And is it really a bad thing to be connecting more often with customers? And we talk a lot about journey mapping, and I want to take this kind of to its next level where, the journey map that is covering all touch points with a customer ends up exposing these channel silos, if you will. Social media is handled over there. We've got our bricks and mortar stores over there. We ship products, so there's the physical distribution element that's yet another organization. And so when we do these journey maps, it calls out an organizational question that for many organizations is a pain point for it really being able to tie them together. And what we talk about here at Forrester is the ability to capture, process insights across all those touch points. It's a big challenge. It really is an organizational problem. It can express itself in terms of the technologies that we use, and we get the data lost amongst all these channels. But what I'm showing on this chart here is the ability to collaborate and to build those journey maps, and the terminology that we use at Forrester is the customer experience ecosystem. These are all the roles within an organization that support that journey map and need to have their hands on board, of which the contact center is one part of this. There's many statistics out there that talk about, a number of times our contact center agents are dealing with problems that are outside their control. But if we're going to exceed in terms of industrializing what we do for omni-channel service, it means that we've got to collaborate across the entire enterprise and build those more comprehensive journey maps that integrate all of those channels. A big challenge right now but we can see elements of a number of organizations who want to deliver superior customer service starting to pull all this together. Tim, over to you in terms of, going a little bit deeper into this.
Perfect. Thanks, Art. So I think you touched upon a lot of really important things that we've seen, at least here at Interactive Intelligence, that have risen to the top over the past couple of years. The concept of the Omni-Channel has been around for many years, but actually pulling it off at the contact center has been a challenge up until probably the last couple of years, as several different contact center vendors like ourselves have aggregated a lot of different technologies together to allow an organization, regardless of their size, to be able to pull multiple channel aggregation together for reporting and tracking and routing and staffing and forecasting, all the different elements that you need to run a successful contact center. But the other piece that you had also brought in was the collaboration element, and I think that's really huge. But the challenge there is bringing them all together. And when I look back, I see that really social media introduced not only the power for the customer to be able to voice their concerns, to shout to the world with an active audience base that could revolutionize the way businesses treated their customers. And I've got to believe the majority of our audience members here today have heard the whole challenge of running a contact center as a cost center versus a profit center or an engagement center. And that tradition really changed as soon as social media came in. It broke what was typically seen as a best-of-breed approach when deploying technologies into your contact center. And in 2016, many contact centers are going to be moving more rapidly to technology that provides them access to all of the applications where they don't have to worry about integrations and multiple administrative endpoints. And they want more of a cloud-based solution that provides a quick spin-up of their applications. So in the omni-channel world, or even the multimodal world where customers are accessing us through all these different devices, you need solutions that are going to provide you access into the real-time monitoring, recording, and then reporting, and then, of course, the scheduling, forecasting, and planning across a single user interface. The customer has changed the way we operate at the contact center level, and we've seen it coming for many years, and in 2016, it seems as if the flip is finally switching. So with that, we've covered Omni-Channel. Let's dive into a shift in the customer experience. So as organizations, especially as smaller organizations, are finding ways to compete with the larger organizations, there's a dramatic shift in focus on winning customers through the customer experience. So that whole competitive pressure to differentiate yourself through a better customer experience has risen to the top. But yet, in 2016, there's a slight change that we're going to see. Art, I'll turn it over to you to start covering this topic.
You know, Tim, this is stuff that's tough. When we deal and support our customers that are managing these customer service operations, there are so many times that they're still under the stress of having to pull the efficiency lever and make sure that we're still, so many agents create so much cost and we're handling so many interactions and we want to push things off. I mean, one of the metrics that I really hate is containment when we talk about IVR. What a great metric. We talk about containing customers because it's efficient. We look at it from a best practice perspective and break it into three buckets, these categories of technology. The ease with which customers can access our companies to obtain service. Certainly the effectiveness element that is still ringing the efficiency bell, but we've talked a little bit earlier, but that we can take a look at things, and we're increasing our research at Forrester on the emotional element. If you go back to our discussion on Omni-Channel, for example, if the customer wants to be under control by going to self-serve first, agents have that opportunity in whatever channel it is, web chat or social media or a live phone call with an agent, that there is that magic moment of being able to do something to affect the emotional experience that the customer has. Are we proactively reaching out to them with something that they don't know and informing them, capturing more of their feedback, empowering agents to get them off of average handle time to more towards problem solving and consulting with customers and giving them, certainly from an efficiency standpoint, the right process guidance. We are looking at, in our customer experience index, a very broad range of ratings across industries. And I put this into the presentations to show that the industries certainly vary. We go from banks all the way down to U.S. federal government agencies. We're expanding our customer experience index research to many countries around the globe now. But this is the U.S. ratings. And I just want to talk about some emotional examples. FedEx, for example, trains their agents to get the bad news out early. At the front end of the call, if there's going to be a shipping delay, let's let our customers know about it right away. But then you can focus on, during the course of that conversation, the problem-solving element. Research shows that emotion is very much impacted by during the course of an interaction, there's the point of maximum pain, so you might as well get that out early. So that's point number one. And then the end of the interaction, that how I ended up at the end of this interaction drives a lot of the rating of an emotional scoring of an interaction. So there's the maximum pain moment, which FedEx says get it out early, and then how it was left. That's sort of, did I answer all your questions, Mr. Customer? Delta, for example, has their middle seat Mondays. They inform customers, they actually say, gee, we know you're a great customer, you got a middle seat. Here's an email, here's a text message that says 500 additional miles. So there's that pain moment, there is that solving the problem, and there's moving that customer. A third example is Geek Squad. Geek Squad characterizes the persona of their customers and their interactions into two categories. There are customers who are inspired by the use of technology, and so their agents are trained to deal with that customer who wants to do some great things with technology. And then there are certainly the other customers. They come in, they're impatient, they have a problem. How do you deal through the course of that emotional scoring and that kind of emotional type of interaction? So it's a very interesting dynamic, Tim, to take a look at this in terms of the emotional elements. And Tim, back over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Art. So in this particular screen, or in this particular area, we're talking about the customer experience focus. So Art talked about the emotional aspect of interactions that are occurring today, and the way it has a dramatic impact on the customer experience. And this has never been more true than the way in which we are approaching customer service today. Over the past several years, there's been this tremendous shift towards delighting our customers. And it wasn't until we had Matt Dixon on the center stage at one of our user conferences last year, and Matt Dixon is with the Corporate Executive Board, and he explained to the audience that there's a change that needs to be occurring in the industry. Instead of delighting your customers and focusing all your energies on giving exceptional customer service, going way beyond what is expected for the customer, you need to focus on simply meeting the customer needs. And again, social media, I believe, was the enabler of this dramatic shift on delighting your customers, mainly because there was too much fear and concern around organizations having customers that are tweeting about bad experiences, and the urge to make sure that every interaction was, if possible, a delight so that they would tweet more about it. I've got to believe that many of you experienced that. Matt's premise was focus on effortless experiences. On each and every experience that you have, make it as effortless as possible for that customer to do business with you. So instead of focusing on all this effort on delighting, they experience something that they expect, which is an easy way to do business with you and to get their problems resolved. They conducted a study that really drove this point home. I'd like to walk you through it. So as they surveyed their audience, the people that participated in, they had built the questions around the perception that most customers think, and loyalty is driven by any time you have an experience that exceeds the customer's expectation. And so if that's the case, they would expect that if you exceed their expectations, boy, these customers are going to spread the word, whether it's through social media, whether it's word of mouth, or what have you. But what that meant was that most organizations would be focusing on this area right here in order to drive that delight. But the survey results came back rather surprising. The survey results show that in reality, customers achieve a certain loyalty level whether you exceed their expectations or not. Which means the bottom line is that delight only happens about 16% of the time, which means delight also increases operating costs 10 to 20%. So what I was going to get at is the bottom line is delighting your customers doesn't pay. It doesn't drive the additional revenue that's needed. Instead, simply meeting the customer expectations achieves the best return on investment for your organization. So how do you get it done? Well, there are a lot of different ways where you can achieve that. And we've already talked about Omni-Channel, but a component of that is Omni-Channel quality management. We today review calls to make sure that the agents are saying the things that they're supposed to say, they're not saying things they're not supposed to say, the customer wasn't getting irate, and we review those. But how much of time is spent on also reviewing emails and chats and textual-based conversations? Quality management must be put in place to be able to manage those as well. But probably the most impactful item on this entire list, when you see workforce staffing and planning, real-time omni-channel visibility, speech analytics and a lot of technologies that would really help. Probably the most successful element that we found with our customers is to invest in agent training. And that can occur today. We have a couple of customers, among many of them, that really have embodied this, and that's B&H Photo and Crutchfield Electronics, actually two competitors in the online electronics industry. They have both achieved the highest rankings in customer service through Consumer Reports magazine, ranked number 1 and 1A side by side. What they do is they do deep dives in training of their agents on products and services. They constantly review those agents' experience and then invest more training in them so that they are the most knowledgeable people that can service their products and services. And there are constant reviews in that, and then they're also providing e-learning modules that provide their agents information that they need at their fingertips. So the shift really, while you can invest in technology that does a lot of automation of these aspects and really help make that customer experience more effortless, self-service, as Art had talked about earlier, and then probably the biggest impact that you can do today to get this achieved is to invest in the training of your agents to make them the most knowledgeable subject matter experts on the planet for your company. Now, another trend that we want to address is the Agile Contact Center. So if I can talk about this just for a moment before I turn it over to Art, they can dig into it a little bit. This rise of the Agile Contact Center is also driven by several different items. It could be economic stress, competitive reasons, and this is around making sure that your contact center can move as rapidly as possible in order to be able to better meet the demands placed upon it by your customers. Give a little more insight into this, Art. I'm going to flip it back over to you.
Tim, thanks. You know, just kind of keying off of the prior discussion here, there's a thread in a lot of what we're talking about today, and it is more towards emotion and loyalty and things that are going to sound kind of soft as opposed to, I know how many calls I took, I know how many agents it took to handle them, I know what my speed of answer is. And that this emotional element, this discussion about delighting customers versus what I've been calling Moneyball for contact centers, hitting base hits on every contact as opposed to extending your reach to try and move towards delight, it really sets the foundation for this need for an agile infrastructure, set of applications, so that we are truly empowering agents to be able to succeed in every one of those magic moments. If we look here on this chart, the very ancient history of the classic cord board, and in the upper right, kind of like the today contact center where, you know, the agents are really lined up side by side, a single screen, a single phone. But down on the bottom, this came from a report that I did on video contact centers. And not that video interaction is for everybody, but there's multiple screens on that agent's desktop. There's more room to work. There's perhaps a little more of an open office environment. Actually, what you see in the background there is the company graphics and logos, so the agents feel a bit more aligned with the company that they're serving. Now, that's not B&H, for example, that's taken from. It's a company over in the UK their name is Shoe, very similar to Zappos here in the US. In our customer experience index, Zappos crops up many times as far as being a top performing company because they get the agents emotionally engaged with their customers. But if you've got an infrastructure like this, it's going to get in your way in terms of being able to respond to customer demands, in terms of being able to do a true omni-channel strategy that spans multiple touch points. This is a literal architectural diagram. Now, I know I'm picking on a very large communications carrier that at their scale, where they're managing thousands of agents across multiple locations, multiple legacy technologies, it's kind of very hard for them to move because there's a complex infrastructure getting in the way. We see at Forrester Research that the move towards cloud and to a certain extent simplification and elimination of a number of vendors is helping people move more and more towards an agile infrastructure. Now let me peel apart these numbers. They're showing up a little bit small on the screen, but the dark blue is today. The light blue is where I want to be in the future. The numbers aren't huge in terms of where people are going, but basically the top two categories that are your on-premise categories are losing share to the off-premise software as a service type of approach to managing a contact center. It frees up technological resources, people who are managing the blinking lights of the servers and upgrading them and the communication carrier interfaces, et cetera, but it allows for an increased level of flexibility. And to a certain extent, we're also seeing in the industry some of these lines that had been hardened before between queuing and routing vendors, CRM vendors who manage the desktop, and your workforce optimization vendors. We're seeing more and more of this starting to come together into more integrated suites. Lines that we didn't think would be crossed in the past, but for example, and I'll name a competitor here, but Zendesk, for example, recently announced voice routing capabilities based on a Twilio platform. So a queuing and routing vendor, a CRM vendor, now taking on and bridging together these into more integrated suites. We're not there yet. There's no question that at this point in time, a full suite that does all of this is a trajectory that we are on, but it provides a bit more in terms of being agile so that there are less integration points of pain. There's more consistency in the data, databases, reporting, user interfaces, how I configure the systems to do things here. But, at the end of the day, the need to be able to get to those emotional elements and those magic moments for our agents to really hit that money ball and those base hits with customers, really calls for some more agility. Tim, I know you had some additional comments here.
Yeah, in this particular case, my job here is to make sure that we're trying to give you add value. As we set the agenda for this kind of trends discussion, we not only wanted to make you aware of those trends that are occurring, but also give you some advice on how you can take advantage of making your contact center ready for the trends and to adopt them and embrace them. So from a vendor perspective, Art talked about this integrated suite approach, and from a vendor's responsibility, we should be embracing that. And that might come as a shock to some of you who have looked at that best-of-breed approach. You've invested in this technology, and I want to be sure that I can extend its life as best as possible. But I would say that from a vendor's perspective, we're trying to make it as much of an effortless experience from our perspective as it is for you to provide to your customers, so that when you shop for a vendor, you're looking for somebody that has a platform that can extend as many of the applications out there as possible for you. And so in this particular trend of the Agile contact center, in order to be agile, you need to be able to move rapidly and have the technology at your fingertips to meet the sudden demands. But while vendors like Interactive Intelligence provide a whole integrated suite of applications, it is also a vendor's responsibility to be sure that we can integrate to your existing solutions and extend its capabilities with third-party apps. So we have to be able to provide an open source platform that makes that much easier with APIs and SDKs, application programming interfaces and software development kits, to make sure that you can indeed extend it, or our partner ecosystem through our dev communities can do that for you and provide them in marketplaces so that all you have to do is visit a marketplace, select the application you want to use to extend or update your environment and roll it out. And then the last one on this list is the rapid feature rollout. Agile contact centers today, regardless of their size, need to have new features coming out much more rapidly than the old style approach of waiting months or even years before you finally get those features that you need. Today's modern contact center vendors provide features at an unbelievable rate, oftentimes updating new features within weeks within days and weeks instead of looking at quarters and years to come out. This could have some concern to contact centers because of fear of disrupting the flow of business, disrupting the flow of the customer experience because of new training initiatives that have to take place to take advantage of these. But fear not. Again, the modern contact center vendor has thought of everything and know that you have the ability to determine which features you want to bring live that meets the business requirements that you have so that you don't disrupt the flow of business for your organization. So from an Agile contact center, you definitely need to be moving in this direction, and it's a trend that we're seeing many of our customers move into 2016 more than the years past. And then for our last of two trends that we want to talk about, 4 technologies. Now, this was a difficult thing for us to do. We could have extended this out instead of top 5 trends. It could have been the top 8 or 10 or 20. But instead what we did is we took 4 technologies, again, focused on just the core technologies here, and thought we'd summarize them here, the things that you need to be thinking about investing in order to move forward for 2016. So in this particular case, these technologies are driven by big data mainly, and it impacts big data as itself, but artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and strategic planning. Get a little bit of background on big data first. Art, I'm going to turn it over to you to cover that element.
Jim, there's a couple of things that have been going on, and I don't know that we've got any big secrets here. But, first of all, from a consumer data perspective, we've seen with social media and, many of their opportunities for customers to engage for service, an increased willingness to share information about themselves. In exchange for, I can get this service, I can get this capability, I can sign up on Facebook, I can make use of Google and Google search, but when we download apps onto our smartphones and we get asked all the questions about, what can I have access to, and as the application asks that question, there is this willingness to share. Some of it might be I'm just in a hurry, but the idea that personal information is available and the ability to integrate that with all the other information that we know about customers, their past order history, what kind of requests, what kind of preferences they have. But being able to tie this in with data that the organization will have about competitors and what's adjacent to us, there's an amazing amount of things that can be done to analyze and to predict what is that person looking for. For example, in the wireless carriers, one of the biggest events is being able to retain customers. So as we see someone's contract coming up, say 3 months in advance, is that person now starting to search around on our website, for example? Where did they go? What plans did they look at? Can we capture that journey, those breadcrumbs, if you will, so that when we interact with that customer, we're more knowledgeable about what types of plans they were looking for? This is a real problem. There is an opportunity with the advances in the technology itself, databases that can be in memory so they can be more responsive. They can automatically capture information such as a person's location. But that renewal of a cell phone contract is a key thing for large cell phone carriers. The more they can be informed, the more they can increase those renewal rates, the more they can provide a package that will really satisfy those customer needs is real critical and real important. And from a specific contact center perspective, can this really be leveraged in terms of more advanced queuing and routing? We see a certain amount of success in terms of profiling customers. I hate to use that term, but literally it's what we're doing, that their behavioral attitudes and that information that we can gather about what their persona is and what the persona of the agent is. That, matching them in some way that drives more increased outcomes is what a number of vendors, like, for example, Mattersight and SatMap, are doing to boost outcomes and to hit that money ball every time for customers and being able to provide better service. So we see some fascinating innovation here. The big thing here is for organizations to really have a better strategy to leverage the tools in terms of customer data management, because for many customers I work with, there's still unfortunately too many sources of the truth. Tim, over to talk about artificial intelligence.
Art, thank you for that. The whole analytics-based matching is incredibly amazing. The ability to actually match an agent and with all their background and data that you know about them to a customer with similar likes, hobbies, interests, background, location, et cetera, is an amazing advancement. But it doesn't happen without a gathering of all the different types of data sources you have, and then applying artificial intelligence to be able to do machine learning and determine where should we best route that customer for the best possible experience. And so from an artificial intelligence perspective, that's one of the things you certainly can gain advantage of, but there are a lot of other areas that we want to address. Probably at the top is speech recognition, a technology that's been around that many of you probably didn't think about that would really use artificial intelligence and big data to make it happen. But there's a concept of many different data points that must go in to make speech recognition very easy to use. Now, from a self-help perspective, we've seen that speech recognition has been kind of a difficult thing to adopt as it relates to IVRs. The idea with it was to have natural language IVRs to be able to allow customers to self-serve themselves. And we've certainly got much, much better, not only from the vendor side, but also from the deployment side and customer usage. So certainly we'll see self-help, as Art had indicated earlier in his slides, that it'll certainly take off more, and we certainly see that IVR self-help will increase with speech recognition capabilities. But some other areas, call analysis. Today you can use speech recognition algorithms combined with data matching and voice print matching to be able to better understand what that customer is saying and what the agent is saying during a live conversation. And so now when you've got hundreds and thousands and millions of calls taking place between customers and agents, speech recognition with artificial intelligence and big data can understand what's being conversed between the two and alert you when there are problems, as well as voice print matching, where you get into security systems and be able to use your voice as your password. Again, more of those items that artificial intelligence will help. The two rising trends that we see are virtual agents and virtual supervisors. So I'm going to touch mainly on virtual supervisors, but just say from a virtual agent perspective, we've seen that introduction into the marketplace with some niche players that provide virtual agent chats with avatars and such. But there's a lot of data improvement that needs to go on there. It's not something that you can simply roll out and make it an effortless experience for your customer. If you think that's the case, you'll only be setting yourself up for failure. So I'll let Art talk a little bit of how we can advance virtual agents in today's world and combine it with real-life agents. But I want to talk about virtual supervisors. And by virtual supervisors, what we're looking at is trying to automate many of the tasks that take place by supervisors or admins as it relates to things like dynamic adjustments to interaction routing, call flows and agent assignments and scripting of agents, all based off of big data. What do we know in real time about the customer? What do we know about the agent? What do we know about the call handling times and the volumes and the wait times and all the traditional metrics that we have, and what intelligent decisions can we make to adjust routing and call flows and scripting and other things to make the operational efficiencies really occur within the contact center? That's something you're going to start seeing happening and bringing out to market, not just by vendors like Interactive Intelligence, but by others, that will make your jobs even easier in providing an effortless experience. All right, I'll bring it over to you to talk more about that virtual agent component.
Sure, Tim. I mean, one of the things I want to do is that there's an increased awareness, but there's no free lunch here. Increasingly, the calls that I'm getting on virtual agents, people are driving an expectation as to what's done with some of the very, very large vendors. There's the assumption that with big investments by companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, et cetera, But you have to understand their business model. You know, Apple's Siri is driving the value of iPhone devices. So Apple's motivation is to make for a virtual assistant experience that, you know, drives personal productivity. It's not processing an insurance claim. Microsoft's Cortana, the main goal behind that for Microsoft at the end of the day is to drive sales of Windows. So there's a tuning towards that. Facebook with M certainly also wants to drive more advertising revenues. It certainly has advanced the science. And let me throw in Amazon's Alexa as well, that wants to drive you towards Amazon to buy products. But when we need to tune and tweak these, or build them, if you will, specifically for customer service, that you still need to kind of go down that path of developing a whole natural language assistant that is specific not only to your industry, but specific to your company. And what I've depicted on this chart is that it can be certainly a front end to and can drive an additional boost of the customer experience. But there's also how do you make sure that that handoff to the agent is done seamlessly. It's done in a way that the customer knows that there's a handoff being done, but the agent is getting all that contextual information. It's carrying the ball forward instead of the classic dump the person out of the IVR and they have to start all over again with the agent. So again, I'm not trying to take the luster off the rose of the interest in artificial intelligence right now, but at the same time, the reality check in terms of what it takes to get these done.
Very good. So let's take the agent pool and let's talk about how you're going to use the big data component for agent scheduling as it relates to strategic planning. So this is a trend and a technology that has been evolving over the years, but something that many contact centers, except the very large ones, haven't been taking advantage of. Strategic planning has to do with looking out into what your goals and your plans are for your contact center and for business in general, and producing real-time goals and strategies for how you're going to bring your contact center along to meet those higher level objectives for your organization. So it goes beyond just simple workforce management, which is scheduling and forecasting the number of butts you need in seats, to staff your contact center to meet whatever you think the interaction demand is going to be placed upon it. And instead, it answers a ton of different questions about not just week-over-week staffing, but also optimization plans. What do you need to do to increase your Net Promoter Score, your customer satisfaction rates, and how is that going to impact your overall performance? If you want to change some of your call handling times or your wait time projections, how is that going to impact the number of agents you need to have live to be able to make that happen? How long is it going to take to train them to get them up to speed? And at what point do you have a tipping balance occur that means you're spending more money than you really need to get the desired impact that you're looking for? Strategic planning tools allow you to take all of that data, previous ACD data, customer interaction data, agent skill sets, agent staffing, costs, attributes, brings them all together and allows you to play what-if scenarios to determine what your outcomes and your goals need to be for the year. These tools are all becoming available to you now, regardless of your size, so that you can be much more efficient in your contact center than you ever have been before. Probably a lot more that we could talk about in strategic planning that is beneficial to you, but it's certainly a trend you need to look at. In the interest of time, however, we need to move on to the next technology, and that's the Internet of Things. You know, if you look at IoT, certainly a trend that's been growing in interest over the past many years. And depending on when you do a Google search and what vendor you talk to, you will see anywhere from projections for 20 billion to 200 billion different devices that will be Internet-enabled by the year 2020. That's a huge number of devices, whether it's appliances, cars, security systems, healthcare solutions, whatever it might be, they're coming online over the years. How does that impact your ability to drive customer service? Well, there's a lot of things to consider here, but I want to let you know that it's not just something that is coming. It's here already, and there are companies that are taking advantage of it. For example, Philips Healthcare, one of our customers, has been using it to take their image devices, and they've built in what they call phone home capabilities that automatically alert the customer service reps to technical problems. When one of their imaging devices has a problem that has been detected, it will automatically send a message into our platform, and it gets routed based depending on the device that's being that has phoned home, the skill sets that are required to be able to troubleshoot that particular problem, and agent availability, and routes it to that agent to be able to start troubleshooting the problem. Many times that problem can be resolved without person intervention, an employee intervention at Philips. So these are things that are happening today, and there are platforms that are out there that can help you take advantage of it. However, let's talk about some other consumer-based goods or some other areas where Internet of Things can come about. And Art, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about IoT.
Yeah, Tim, I think it's a fascinating category, but certainly at the end of the day, I did not get excited about someone talking about a web-enabled toaster. I just think really we have to put the right sanity check on this. I remember when I first came back as an analyst back in 2010, I worked with a number of utilities companies who were concerned about smart grid and smart meters. And certainly not from the standpoint of how they would serve customers, how they would offload costs of having people drive around to read meters. It was more the implication of, gosh, if we open up to the consumer more information about their energy utilization, what kind of impact does that have on the contact center and agent training and the information they need to have? You have to look at this from the standpoint of what phase, where does Internet of Things make sense in terms of the whole customer life cycle from when they engage, discover, explore, buy, use, and ask about products. And during all of those phases, where do these feeds from things make sense? Interestingly enough, just recently I read an announcement by Novartis working with Qualcomm so they could integrate inhalers, literally the inhaler that people are using who are suffering from, those kinds of conditions where they need to use one, that data would be fed into the healthcare company that's looking at individuals' utilization. So the medical device industry is certainly one that, in terms of increasing care, is important. Another, Novartis again announced with Google that they're taking a look at literally contact lenses that would be integrated with wireless technologies so that they could do glucose level monitoring. So we see from a percentage perspective overall, 90% of companies saying they're doing Internet of Things today, and that growing to 28%. But for your industry, are you going to grow revenue? Are you going to take care of the emotional element of customers with integrating these flows and being able to get them into an agent-assisted type of interaction that makes sense?
So Art, we're going to go ahead and move into the final trend, legacy hardware end of life. So what we're seeing as a general trend in the industry is a lot of traditional vendors that have been in the marketplace for a while who have created a huge user community of loyal customers, have come to, as I mentioned earlier, the challenge of best-of-breed approach. And we're seeing a tremendous number of legacy vendor customers starting to look at how they can move today to become more agile, to adopt all the omni-channel capabilities, and all the other components that we've talked about today. But there's a trend that has been occurring a little bit, and Art, at Forrester, you guys have done a great job of being able to provide some insight into what's going on with your tech radar. I'm going to turn it over to you so you can share this with the audience.
So this may be a little bit of an eye exam for some folks online, but basically this chart maps the maturity of technologies. It's a common methodology that we use at Forrester, where the bottom is the phase of the market going from creation/startup all the way to decline. And the vertical axis is, in essence, the business value. The red line that you see is more marginal technologies. You don't see a lot of deployment. The gray line is more the mid-range, and the blue line is really your mainstream technologies. But the basic takeaway here is that quality monitoring, IVR, case management, knowledge management, a number of these technologies are clustering at the top of the curve. And what typically happens, like we also saw in ERP, which is really an aggregation of multiple software systems from the past. CRM is also an aggregation. So, like I mentioned earlier in terms of the Agile contact center discussion that we had, we're seeing a maturation, therefore a consolidation more and more into integrated suites. so that legacy that we have, both hardware and software that we have in our contact centers, there's more of an aggregation that we see that's going on.
Thank you, Art. Yeah, and my job here is to explain to you how you can achieve that. So there are a lot of different ways where you can take advantage of moving from a legacy best-of-breed solution into an integrated suite of applications that Art just had projected on the tech radar. And the bigger discussion is around how do you get there easily. And really the easiest way to move to an integrated suite is by moving to the cloud. But the question that always comes up is, well, what is my total cost of ownership over the lifetime of a cloud solution versus a premise solution? And it's been a debate for some time, but the realization is that because business changes, so does your TCO. So I built this quickly here to kind of give an idea of what happens. So if your business remains constant and predictable, and you're evaluating between a premises-based solution versus a cloud solution, and you're trying to answer this question, well, the TCO for a premises solution typically is more favorable. That's simply because you can predict your costs easily. Your business isn't changing at all. The challenge is I don't know how many companies today that live in a world where their business doesn't change and their business needs change. So if that happens to you and business needs do change, and what happens is it causes the cloud to become much more favorable. So let's say you have an acquisition. Well, that's a change. How does that change the needs for your contact center infrastructure? Is there additional integration that must be done? Again, driving the costs. If you have a tremendous number of changes, especially if you're a global organization, well, then it dramatically tips the TCO in favor of a cloud solution. So whether you're dealing with acquisitions or additional growth, competitive pressure that's occurring, economic changes have cost you to switch from a CapEx to an OpEx model. You've got tech end of life that you've invested in, and you need to upgrade and purchase new over the course of that time that you thought you would have a stable environment. The cloud becomes much more favorable in a TCO model than it does in a premises-based model when you own all the hardware. So with that, I'd like to move us into the Q&A period. We've gone through and discussed several different trends that are occurring over to 2016, and now it's your chance to ask additional questions. We've received several questions already that have come in, but I'd like to remind you to go and submit any additional questions you have as we're going through the Q&A pod. For now, I'd like to go ahead and introduce two additional industry experts that are going to help us answer these questions. First is Don Van Doren. Don is president of Vanguard Communications Corp., an independent consulting company that helps clients plan, design, and implement effective customer interaction solutions. Most of Vanguard's work is with enterprises that seek to improve their contact center and self-service technologies and processes and to integrate the customer experience as a fundamental component of meeting business goals. Joining Don will be Sheila McGee-Smith. Sheila is a leading communications industry analyst and strategic consultant and the founder of McGee-Smith Analytics, LLC. With a practice focused on the contact center and enterprise communications markets, she works on a daily basis with both solution providers and enterprises to help them develop strategies to meet the escalating demands of today's consumer and business customers. Don, Sheila, welcome. Thank you guys very much for joining us here. We've got a lot of different questions that have come in here today, and so Sheila, I'm going to start with you first of all. And this is a question that was around the Omni-Channel discussion, and it came in, and it was, who is using Twitter and what does that look like? Would you expand a little bit based off your experience of dealing with multiple contact centers of who you see using Twitter?
Hi, thank you, Tim. And it's interesting, the end of my bio there said that I work with companies helping them to meet the expanding demands of business and consumer customers, right? And I think there are a lot of types of companies that are using Twitter, but largely I think it's safe to say that business-to-consumer brands get a lot more out of Twitter than business-to-business type marketers. And then if you take that even another level, I'd say the three biggest verticals that we see using social to good effect are communications providers, travel and hospitality companies, and retail. So I think there are two elements there, the vertical and the type of customer that you have. And the other thing is, it was mentioned during the webinar, in the past, the concern with Twitter was to try and avoid a viral problem. I think now there's such a better recognition that there's an ability to delight very easily. When people go onto Twitter and those get responded in near real time, the level of delight is quite high. So that's how I'd reply to that, Tim.
Perfect. Thanks, Sheila. Don, I'm going to bring you on next. I'm going to ask you a question around real-time speech analytics. I think the basic question was, can you just elaborate a little bit on real-time speech analytics? And if you could, address a little bit about some of the benefits you see around that.
Sure, Tim. Thanks very much. I think as we're getting into the whole thing about analytics, it's wise to separate them, the post-call analytics from the real-time analytics. And I know the question was really focused on the real-time portion, but I'd like to just kind of contrast the two to make sure that we're clear on what the differences are. Post-call, basically you go in, you are looking through linguistic analysis and identifying of keywords and phrases and that sort of thing. The ability to really discover call patterns and trends, and also whether there are staffing problems or technical issues or questions that people seem to have about this. And that can come from post-call analysis, which basically goes in and listens. The systems listen to the recorded speech and then make analysis of that and offer guidance for marketing purposes. Real-time analytics has really a couple of different areas where it's trying to get into. Number one is, the challenge, by the way, is that the processing required to do this in real time makes the things I talked about in post-call much more effective, just because you have more time to go through that analysis. Real time is real time. You're enacting in real time and making decisions on that. What you need to do, there are two kinds of areas where we see this really coming into play. One is identifying calls that aren't going well. In other words, if a customer is upset, if they're threatening to drop their service or whatever, it's possible to alert a supervisor or bring in a retention expert. So actually bring in another person to either whisper to the agent offering suggestions or else transferring the call over to that individual. And then the second possibility in real time we find is offering prompting to agents, where you basically are directing the conversation or popping up a screen with additional information on a particular subject. This is going to become especially important, in my opinion, as we do more self-service and other self-help applications, and the more difficult calls are coming to the contact center agents in the future. Giving them this kind of real-time assistance and popping information could be a really important issue going forward.
So thank you, Don, for that. And I'm going to bounce a little bit between Don and Sheila here and just let the audience know there's some really good questions coming in. And I want to give time to get these questions answered. So I'm going to extend this conference, this webinar, for about 5 minutes longer. And again, I promise to follow up with you on those that didn't get answered. So Sheila, coming back to you, are there plans to have blended workforce optimization was the general question. Feel free to dig into that a little bit.
So when I think of workforce optimization, there's a lot of different elements, but the two key ones are quality management and workforce management. So from a quality management perspective, I think blended workforce quality management is available today. So a lot of companies, and I've done some polling during webinars and conferences that I've spoken at, a lot of companies still have voice-only quality management. But the offers are available from vendors like Interactive Intelligence as well as others to go beyond that and to do quality management of full channels, right? So just adding screen recording brings in the ability to do email and web chat. Adding text-speech analytics allows for much more efficient quality monitoring of non-voice interactions. I think knowledge management systems are another great way that workforce optimization becomes an omni-channel tool, right? A single knowledge management system being able to support self-service agents and self-service regardless of channel, be it mobile, email, or web. To touch quickly on workforce management, I think that's a little bit more challenging. Workforce management as a technology grew up around voice and around Erlang C, where there are assumptions about the arrival of calls based on certain parameters that just don't hold true for non-real-time channels, right? Like email, like web chat. And so I think it's tools like the one that Interactive Intelligence has, Interactions Decisions, that helps with more of a strategic look at workforce management and less of a kind of a Erlang C tactical look that's required. So I think you're right in saying blended workforce management, perhaps a little bit more challenging.
Okay. I'm going to ask that we go into what we call the power round. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask each of you last couple of questions and answer as rapidly as you can. Don Van Dorn, we're starting with you. The question is, are you seeing CRM and contact center technologies merging to one solution in the near future? And then I'll go to Art after this.
Certainly CRM is crucial for a broadening number of contact centers. And so whether those will actually be merged within a single company, I mean, we've seen some CRM companies adding contact center kinds of capabilities. I think we're going to see more of that kind of thing in the future, and I suspect that companies like Interactive Intelligence will be building links with CRM solutions as well.
And we already have. And Art, going over to you for a quick question, and this is to do with one of your slides regarding the channel utilization. What is the channel utilization breakout for consumers versus B2B? Is it significantly different? And then Sheila, I'll come to you next.
Yep, Tim, this is a great one, and B2B is really tough to measure. You can survey consumers and ask them what channels they use, and we get a pretty straightforward analysis. Going into the B2B realm, there is some thinking that the patterns are similar. But I have to say, from what we have from a data perspective and a quantitative perspective, I mean, even in B2B, we tend to use the tools that we use as consumers. But a number of times there are additional elements in a B2B type of transaction that may lend itself more towards an interaction with an agent. But I don't have quantitative on that. I think there are certainly some similarities, but you still need to plan for an omni-channel future, even in a B2B world.
I agree with you. Real quickly, to address one of the questions that came in around omni-channel, the question was, what exactly is omni-channel? I'm going to give you a definition we've used. Basically, we have a description of omni-channel being simply multi-channel done right, placing the customer experience at the center such that whomever is interacting is recognized every channel and receives consistent treatment regardless of contact channel. And it basically means anticipating that customers may start in one channel and move to another as they progress to a resolution. It also means deploying technologies to make the transition between those channels as convenient and enjoyable as possible. Sheila, to you, a question on cloud adoption. Just to cut to the core of this, why aren't contact centers migrating to cloud more quickly given all the benefits that cloud provides?
Well, first of all, I'd almost debate the premise. I think cloud adoption in contact center is moving with really great speed. If we can compare it, for example, even to UC as a service. But then if you say, okay, why isn't everybody moving? We're following typical technology replacement cycles. I mean, I went through the analog to digital, then the digital to IP, then IP to SIP. These are 10-year cycles. So I think given the technology cycles, I think it's actually progressing fairly smoothly and fairly quickly.
I agree with you on that. Certainly the migration trends are much more favorable to the cloud than it is to the premises. Back to you, Don, and then Art will finish up with you. With cloud solutions, how do we avoid compliance issues of data security with HIPAA and Sarbanes-Oxley?
Well, I think this is one of the key questions that I think a lot of companies have been asking themselves, and increasingly we're seeing the cloud vendors really stepping up to the whole security issue and and really providing HIPAA compliance and Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. So, while that is a concern, I think, of a lot of people, they need to talk to the vendors and just find out what kinds of capabilities these companies have put in place. I think they'll be pleasantly surprised with the kind of security you can get.
And Art, we're going to end with you. I'm going to ask you actually two quick questions because they were related to your presentation. And that at the very beginning of your presentation, there was a question, is SMS included in the phone percentage from the beginning of the presentation? I don't remember exactly which slide that was on.
Yeah, that's the channel utilization question, and SMS was not included. It is that we have that data as a separate element. I didn't want to put the 16 different choices on the chart. So SMS is not included. The phone or voice is a voice conversation with an agent, but certainly we do see SMS as another important channel in terms of interacting with customers.
And where do you see, last question, self-service as it relates to community support? So as you were looking at self-service growth, does community support roll up under self-service and that data?
Nope. Actually, that is another one of the 16 that we have that I didn't choose to put on the chart, that being able to get service via community. And you have to remember that communities break into two different types. There's a moderated community, and then there is a total self-help where it's just, fanatics of Apple, for example, may hop on and serve each other. But there are also the moderated type communities that are managed by a vendor with someone on there. So that's a very important one. But again, just in the sake of brevity and some of the real top channels, I didn't include that data on the chart.
Thank you, Art. We've got about a dozen or more questions that we still need to get to, but unfortunately time is not going to allow us to do that. So as promised, we will take each one of those questions. We'll make sure we get them assigned to our three analysts here and get answers from them and shoot them back to you to be sure you're getting the answers you need. So in closing, I'd really like to thank our industry analysts, Art Schoeller with Forrester Research, Sheila McGee-Smith with McGee-Smith Analytics, and Don Van Doren with Vanguard Communications. But I'd also like to thank you, our audience, for your time and attention for today's topic, especially as we've gone past our initial allotted time. As a reminder, this presentation is being recorded, and you can find a link to the recording in an email that we'll send to you before the end of the week. Thanking you for your time and wrap up. And for those listening to this recording who would like to get a copy of this information, you can visit our website at inion.com or simply email us at interact@inion.com. This now concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for joining us.